You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to this bonus episode of the Dodge Movie Podcast. Today, we are concluding our month of talking about Oregon-made films by sharing with you our experience making our two films. So in a previous episode, we talked about making A New Promise, my senior capstone film from 2017. And now we're going to talk about the movie that we made in 2020 that was written and directed by my husband, Michael W. Dodge, starring Katie Prentiss and James Sweet. It is called Second Story, if I haven't said that, and it's about Mary. She is running late while trying to keep working as usual. He has his hands full with a surprise as usual. The four walls of the elevator force the pair of them to interact. After each of them gets the opportunity to help the other, they'll leave the elevator different than when they entered. The tagline for the film is "Come along for the ride." So, Mike, kick us off with your own pickup line.
Good thing I don't need that. So it doesn't really fit my thesis that the first line can tell you about the rest of the film. But if you kind of twist it around a little bit and don't look at it literally, the line is "good thing I don't need that." You could say that does speak a little bit to his character. So it kind of half works.
Mm-hmm. And talk about a shot that we're really trying to pull off. You had this idea, which makes total sense. You're going to kick off your film with some head trauma, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, that needs to maybe be a director's trademark, I guess. But so the idea behind this, okay, I got to back up a little bit more. Oh my gosh, this is going to be an 8-hour episode. So one of my ideas behind this film was to invert the traditional roles of the genders. So in a classic rom-com, right, the male is kind of the uptight, Cary Grant, I got too much to do, right?
Yeah.
And then the female is this little flighty, flibberty gibbet kind of, I just don't know how to operate this doorknob kind of thing. And I wanted to flip those. Mm-hmm. So I needed the male character to be that flighty, flibberty gibbet, chaotic, disorganized kind of person. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what better way to show that than to show the person not even having the hands to operate a door, right?
Right.
So they're just like, they don't think ahead enough to like, okay, I could put my foot in there. No. You're going to use the one thing you had available, which is your head.
Right. In
between the elevator doors. Now, I saw this in my mind's eye when I was writing, like, this is awesome. The producer says, we can't kill our actor.
Yeah. This struck fear in me when you would talk about it.
And I'm like, no, this is totally, we got this, no problem. I said, okay, fine. Like, I'll just lay down on the floor of the elevator and I'll put my head in there and the doors will hit my head before they hit his head. And you said, well, we can't kill the director either.
Right.
But I knew from geometry that if we shot it at a steep angle, the doors didn't actually have to impact his head for the visual effect. So we could use an apple box.
That was my idea. Like, okay, let's get something that's wider than his head, and the doors and it'll be low. Mm-hmm. The doors will hit that. They'll bounce back open, and my actor will not be injured. Mm-hmm. And then we discovered it's difficult for him to walk into the elevator if there's a giant box in his way.
Correct.
So our lovely actor, James, said, I can do this.
Right.
And I was terrified.
I wasn't.
And he was brilliant. I think he kind of he used his shoulder kind of to bear the brunt.
I'm not exactly sure how he did it. He has done stunt work before. He's a brilliant actor, so he pulled it off.
He did. And to this day, if Mike sees that scene, he laughs, and it's his own film.
I think I'm the only person who laughs, but I laugh at that scene every time. I
feel bad for you because I think if people I think it happens so quick in the film, and people are still kind of getting their sea legs and trying to figure things out, that I don't know if people see it the first time that they
may not. And
I
that's
think
okay.
it takes a few viewings. So if you haven't seen the film, appreciate and look out for that stunt, because it is really good. And then he walks in and he's like, a good thing I don't need that, because we all need our heads.
Right.
So
he's showing
he's
that,
being
that
sarcastic.
he's being sarcastic. He's a little bit witty. He likes to play on words, etc. So it establishes the character. So I have to say, I'm just going to jump into, speaking of character, that I don't know that other people write films with less obsessing over every line than I did on this film.
I think you're right.
But I assume that your professionals all spend the same amount of time. When somebody said, when we were getting notes after we'd done one rough cut, somebody said something about it being long, and I was like, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to be rude, but there's not a single goddamn line in there that I can take out. Each and every line was specifically crafted to get from point A to point B. I have never in my life spent that much effort on that few words.
Now, when you first wrote this, was it 30 pages?
I was mid-20s and not done yet, and we had pizza with Dustin and Lisa, and I was saying I was kind of a little bit, long, and I knew I needed to get shorter for the festival circuit, and Dustin said, you can always cut more, and I took it as a challenge, and I came home, and I went at it with a scalpel.
Like immediately,
I was going to cut that damn thing down to size,
right.
And I got it down closer, right? And then I just kept honing and squishing, and eventually I got to the point where, like I said, I think it's like balsamic vinegar. I don't know how I could make it any shorter, even one line shorter, and still have it make sense.
Right. And there are so many good lines. And unfortunately, I think that's another thing that gets lost on most audiences. It wasn't really until we started doing auditions and some of our actors were asking us questions and you were explaining it, and even just setting up the characters so that they understood who they were going to be, I realized how much effort and intensity and thoughtfulness that you put into the script, that I do think that is lost on most people.
I like to think that it comes through subconsciously, that the film makes sense at a certain level. But yes, there's a ton of backstory behind there that is not really visible.
Right.
Right.
And watching it again last night in preparation for this podcast, those first few scenes with Katie and James as we're getting to know Mary and Jock, the banter between the two of them, like, we got so lucky with these two actors. I love Katie's kind of just dismissive attitude that she has, and she's just annoyed with this cretin that has burst into her elevator, because we know she's already annoyed. Our very first scene is seeing her. She's headed out of this building, and then she gets a text, and it's obviously not good. We know that. We don't know what the text was, but something happened, and she's annoyed, and so she kind of goes back into the building. So we already know that that's the frame of mind she's in, and then Happy Go Lucky comes in, and he's in a great mood. Like, he's like, hey,
Well, he's there to surprise his daughter with good news.
Yeah.
So regarding her turning around and going back in, that came out in research, right? So I did a lot of research on people being stuck in elevators. And one article I read, a person who was stuck in an elevator was an attorney. And they said they were stuck, but they still could get cell coverage. And their boss texted them. And they said, no, I'm stuck in the elevator, boss. And he says, well, you have signal so you can keep working. Like, literally their boss wanted me. And so that was kind of what I channeled for that. And originally the idea came from a dear friend of mine said her dad had been trapped in elevators many, many times. And at the time that seemed very unique to me. I've subsequently talked to people who've also been trapped in an elevator many times. But I thought, what we look for in storytelling, right, is we want to compress everything. We want to put a time pressure, and a physical pressure is awesome too. So can you trap people in a small space where they have a time constraint, and if they don't know each other. So to me, I can't believe there aren't a billion films about being trapped in an elevator, because it is a perfect narrative device.
Well, we do see it a lot, because especially ever since we've made this, we've seen...
No, I see them everywhere.
Yeah, now we see elevators and all kinds of... And it's funny because, I don't know how much you want to go into this, but we built the elevator because you knew that filming in an actual elevator would be close to impossible because of how compact they are.
Right. The standard size elevator is 4 feet by 6 feet, and it's hard to get too many people in there in the first place, but having 2 people and then having a camera crew in there, I knew wouldn't work.
Right.
So
lighting it.
One of the tricks that they do is they use cargo elevators, which are much larger, and then set dress them. But then you also have the problem that you referred to previously, which is kind of boring just to have a bunch of medium shots of people talking. So I really wanted to be able to shoot from some different angles. So we had our carpenter, Tom, build removable panels on the sidewalls so that we could pull those out and shoot from slightly different angles.
That was brilliant.
Yeah. And I have to say, I was hoping we would get more angles than we did. I just don't think with the geometry that we could get the different shots that I was hoping we could. But I do think that it contributed to the film by having us, we could really have, an additional couple of angles that you just wouldn't see otherwise.
Right.
And one of the things that I really wanted to do was to have shots where it was dirty with one person, so that we showed that the two of them were in frame together, because it's pushing them together for the viewer. And it's hard to do that when they're sitting against a wall and you're shooting from in front of them, right? They're like optically on the same plane.
Right.
So if you can get to that side wall, right, now you have that depth. It gives you a depth that you didn't have otherwise.
Right. I like how, like, when we first meet them, luckily the elevator was big enough that you showed that there was space between them. And then as the movie goes along, they get closer and closer together. Like their shoulders get closer and closer, as well as they get closer and closer, because they're going through some stuff.
This is again where it's great having professional actors, because I was able to talk to him about this idea and I didn't have to do the blocking myself.
No, they were so good.
Right.
They were so good. And you guys commend the three of you, because you did a lot of rehearsals on Zoom, and then they came out.
Then we brought them out we did a test day with lighting and cameras, and also to let the actors get a sense of the physical space.
To feel it, yeah. Did we ever name the elevator? We were going to. Oh, that's right. You like that name, because you named our pig Earl.
Well, that's because it was Defer Earl. Duff was not nearly as interesting as Earl.
Why was it Earl? Because it started with an E? Elevator?
Yeah. Pepe the Plate and Earl the Elevator. So to explain Pepe the Plate, so we have in the film, it's important that the elevator stops at one point and then resumes. And we built this in the garage. We didn't have the ability to jostle the elevator like they would in a Marvel film. So
no hydraulics were involved.
Having seen the old Star Trek episodes where they all have to rock back and forth in coordination, I knew that we needed some sort of signal to the actors to say that the elevator had stopped, so that they could do a little body motion to sell it, right? But if I said anything or snapped my fingers, it would ruin the sound, right? So I came up with a simple expedient. We had plates for craft services, and I drew a happy face on one side and a frowny face on the other, and I would hold it up, and then I'd flip it around to the right side so that the actors knew what was happening in the elevator. And then my editor brilliantly added that effect after the fact with the sound and the visual. It looks like the elevator was a real elevator.
Yeah, I jostled the video.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, it was that. I was pleased with that editing there. And speaking of the elevator, okay, if you're going to make a movie and you have to build a set, know somebody who knows what they're doing. Because if it wasn't for our wonderful friend Tom, who built us a very sexy elevator, I don't think it would have sold it. And in one of the festivals, somebody even asked, were you guys in a real elevator? So that, I think, is a huge coup because
Yeah.
we sold it.
And I will say that I don't know if Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg is like this, but I helped on the sets too. You did. I was his assistant carpenter, and he would make fun of me, rightfully so, because my carpentry skills are not that good. And my motivation is also not fantastic when it comes to carpentry. I'm willing to help him out, but he's definitely more a measure thrice, cut once kind of guy, and that's not me. I'm like, I carry that heavy log over here.
So the timeline is interesting too, because basically you went out to lunch with Tom in I think late January, early February of 2019, and came home and said, Tom says we can build an elevator. And I was like, okay. And we had set aside the funds, so we knew we had the money. And I said, okay, the best time to film is August. So, okay, we're making, and like in the kitchen, I remember saying that, and it was like, okay, we're making a movie this August.
I thought it was 2020, not 2019.
No, we made it in 2020, but
I didn't think we were in pre-production for over a year, were we? I thought it was early January of 2020, and then we tried to cast.
You're right. So it was February of 2020 when we decided to make the movie in August of 2020. Yes.
Yeah. And so we had some hiccups with casting, right? And we had, in A New Promise, we had an 11th hour rewrite of the script. But in this case, we had some last minute recasting, and credit to our actors because they came in on relatively short notice. They were both off book every time we did anything.
Oh my gosh. You were amazing.
And I couldn't have asked for better actors to work with. They just were so professional and so easy to work with. I had so much fun. And I will admit this, Katie can tell you, even as I talk now, I got teary on the last day. I had so much fun.
Mm-hmm. And not to talk about it too much, because I know it's not your favorite topic, I feel like it would be wrong to not acknowledge that when we all went into lockdown, it was like, oh, are we still making a movie? And it was kind of like, hey, they said it's only going to be 2 weeks, so let's just keep going. And we kind of thought this will be something good. It'll distract us. We won't have to think about what everybody else is dealing with. And there were some issues with I wanted everyone to feel safe. I always want everyone to feel safe. Like Mike said, with A New Promise, when we were filming on the street, I was very cognizant. I've been a UPM on another film where we were doing a bicycle was going down a street and crossing a street at dusk. And that was scary to me because I'd never want anyone to get hurt, not only on my watch, but at all. And so kind of just trying to navigate that. And we had to change how craft services is done, and we had to change how some of filming is done. And so it just added an extra challenge on top of making a low budget movie in your garage in August, mind you. I mean, it was hot that day, making sure everybody stayed cool, making sure everybody was well fed, had lots of water, just everything that goes on normal in filmmaking. And then we had this kind of added thing that we had to deal with. So we made it through.
So we talked a little bit ago about the things that maybe aren't immediately obvious. And one of the things I was referring to when I said I couldn't cut a line is so many lines of dialogue are there to set up things or as callbacks, right? There's lines that she parrots back at him that he said. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to capture kind of that, you mentioned the witty banter from the classic romantic comedies, right? And part of that was that wordplay. And it wasn't quite maybe at the level of an episode of the Gilmore Girls, but the intent was to capture that and to have that back and forth and to set it up, and that the language that each one of them uses is very specifically chosen, whether it's to get to the next line that they're delivering to make it sound right or not. And I don't know that your casual viewer, or maybe even your not so casual viewer, is going to catch that. I don't know, to be honest, if somebody without reading the words on the page would notice, oh yeah, she said, I don't know whether to be impressed or mortified, and he said that a little bit ago, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think that the viewer, hopefully it sticks in their brain.
I do think that some of the lines are very cerebral. Like, I had to ask you a couple times, like, yeah, what does this mean, or what is this reference? And that's what I come back to. I had no idea how intentional and how thoughtful like you said, every single line was, because it had a purpose to inform the viewer about Mary or Jock or their relationship or their past.
Right. That was the part where I felt like I tried to distill it down as much as possible and hope that subconsciously that lends kind of a reality to it or verisimilitude, where the viewer is going to see those characters and feel like they're fully fleshed out characters. And a lot of that too is the actors and their ability to do that. Mm-hmm. Right. That's the part that I don't know that without great actors that the film would work. Right. I mean, I think it really did depend on the cast and crew to realize it. One of the things that I mentioned is I did research, right? Mm-hmm. And people do get stuck in elevators. And one of the worst was some poor nun was stuck over like Thanksgiving holiday because everybody left and she was stuck and had to survive on like a bottle of water and some lifesavers or something. It was pretty horrible. But it turns out that the average is 10 minutes where people are rescued, which is also was the target for short films, because in festivals they like it to be about 10 minutes. And what that meant was it could run not just kind of in real time, but like the clock is running the entire time. So in direct opposition to A New Promise, this film doesn't cut back and forth. Pretty mm-hmm. much once you see Mary come out of that building, you can start a stopwatch and it's just running consistently, mm-hmm. like monotonically throughout time. And that allows, I think, us to have that sense of being trapped in the elevator too, mm-hmm. right? I think if we cut away to exteriors or anything else, it would remove some of that sense of claustrophobia for the viewer, mm-hmm. and hopefully that comes across. But then we added in the security camera footage. And so that was shot obviously with the same camera. Or actually, no.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't. It was shot with a GoPro.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that was Jordan's idea. I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
And it helped us out with cutting at different times.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're shooting that from above, and that was the GoPro that she rigged in kind of the rafters, the top part of the elevator set. And we tried to zhuzh it up, and at first I thought we would do black and white. But that gave kind of like, we got, I think, a few notes that they thought it was like a stalker.
Mm-hmm. It was creepy. It made people feel like there was somebody watching them.
Right, like single white female. So then added in color and
we added some grain to make it look worse than it. Because it did look different, but it still looked, because GoPros have gotten really good, so it mm-hmm. still looked pretty good. So we added some noise to the signal.
Right. And my thought was there's a line in there where he's telling a story about how she falls into a cavern.
I love that.
And I wanted the shot to be from above for that, mm-hmm. to give the viewer the sense that she's in this cavern, that she's been trapped. Right. And he says, and she landed on, I think, the cloth. Right. Mm-hmm. So they're sitting there on this beautiful maroon rug. And this was an adventure in and of itself, because obviously we had to have carpeting in there because we were making our own elevator. And so I thought, well, we'll get industrial carpet. So it'll look like it would be an elevator in a building, right? You wouldn't have home carpet in an elevator. And then we found a place where we could get it stitched on the outside. And you had to buy it in such a big amount. We had all this left over. So for a little bit more, we stitched it up. And now I have the bigger one in my office at home, and the smaller one is for yoga. So that was really clever, I guess, as independent filmmakers. Think about your home decor when you're making your sets, because everything you pay for, you can just bring it home. But I noticed also that there is code for where the railings can be, because it's based on the average height of a human, because it needs to be where your hand is. And the idea behind railings, I didn't realize this when I was younger and I didn't fall over, but is to give you something to grab onto if you lose your balance. So it needs to be very close to where your hand would be for it to do its job properly. Well, I didn't know how big my actors were. So I actually had them sit down and measure, because I wanted that railing to be behind their eyes. So it acted as a leading line when we were shooting them, when they were sitting down. So I actually had them measure themselves at home so that I could figure out where to put the railings. And our carpenter was brilliant. He figured out that you could use it to help hide the seam for the removable wall panels.
Well, not only that, but didn't we have to put 2 pieces of plywood together, and so it hid that seam too?
Yes. He was very clever about all those kinds of things. And I was very sad that we couldn't keep the elevator. I didn't know what we would do with it. I thought, could we donate it to the local high school? Could I turn it into a he shed? However, luckily it was able to be recycled, and the wood is now part of the deck. So that was nice.
So the elevator is still with us.
Earl lives on.
Will always be.
Right. So when we had shooting in an actual elevator, because we needed shots of them coming in and out of those doors.
To sell that they were in the elevator.
And so you were very concerned that it would look right. And I thought, no, we've got these removable panels. We can make this work, right? We don't need a whole lot. And we get there, and so we've got these, they're not 4 feet by 8 feet. They were like, 4 by 4, 3 by 4. They were pretty big pieces of plywood.
Big, and they're heavy.
And we had 2 of them. And we rapidly discovered that in order to sell this, we're going to have them like next to each other in the back of the actual practical elevator behind the actors. And it needs to not have a seam. But we also can't be in the shot. So the grip and I each take one of these, and we're crouched in the corner of this, again, 4 foot by 6 foot elevator. Ain't much to it. We're holding them up, trying to keep these bendable big things next to each other. And then our costume designer is trying to operate the elevator controls to keep the stinking doors open. It was delicious, kind of independent filmmaking at its best.
Because everyone was in the elevator except for, I think, me.
You with sound and our cinematographer. Yeah.
But I think that Elise, our PA, was also in the elevator, but I can't remember.
She was holding something.
Holding something. So I wanted a photo of this, but everybody was working because we had a really small crew, and nobody could get a picture of. I should have had Miriam do it. Maybe she could have done it with her phone, but it would have been bananas for everyone to see. And so it's funny because when we watch the scene, the doors open and there's 2 people, and I'm like, no, there's really like 7 people in that elevator.
I assume that every film has moments like that where the crew's all like, oh, remember.
I felt like it brought the whole like crew together. Like after that scene, after we shot it, I felt like everybody had a moment of, oh my God, can you guys believe we just did that? Like a huge achievement. It just seemed like it buoyed the entire crew.
Right.
After that shot.
Yeah. And someone we know mentioned that for plays that, when you're in a play with these other people, that your almost like family, that when you see them 10 years later, even if you haven't seen them at all, it's like joining again. And I really felt that here with this crew, that we made this little miniature family, in a sense that they're a special tribe, that whenever we see any of them ever again, right, it's different. And I don't have that experience. I played sports, I've been involved in businesses, and to me, this is a singular experience for me, is the cast and crew. It was pretty wonderful. Now, I mentioned that we had a moment of recasting. So we went through auditions for the role of Mary. We saw, I think, 12 people all told. And as we were going through the auditions, we had some people that I thought, okay, I think this person would work, right? I like what they've done. And then we got to Katie, and she did, I'm getting upset, like emotional. She did the most fantastic emotional breakdown of Mary. It was stunning, right? Seeing this, and it was so raw. And then we get on set, and we all know this is a big deal, right? This is an important part of the film, and it's going to be really hard for her to get there over and over again, because we're doing at least, a couple of takes. And so I really wanted it to be a very safe space. And so I was trying to be very quiet and very calm and, get in there. And then it was, I think this probably happens everywhere. And then one of the crew was just like, all right, everybody, it was spoiled the moment. I was so frustrated with, I had gone to all this trouble to try to get her in the spot. But to her credit, she was a soldier and she did it anyway. She delivered that performance. And that to me is, again, amazing. I think that sells the entire, that whole part of the scene, is having that performance where she really is convincingly very, very upset.
Yeah, I got to know Katie over the course of the whole pre-production and production, and when in the film, when you see her lip quiver, that's real. Like, she got herself to a place, and she said that, I think when we were in rehearsal, she said that she knew somebody who had panic attacks, and so she had witnessed a panic attack, and that's where she was able to kind of get there. And man, she sold it. She's a fabulous actress.
And one of the things I was concerned about was the thought, and as captured in the script, was that she would have physical reactions as well. So she would get maybe flushed and maybe sweaty. And so I talked to our costume designer and makeup artist and said, hey, can we do this? And she said, absolutely no problem. And
we think like, oh, she's going to have like a little spray bottle and she'll just spray Katie down in between scenes.
But no, that's not how it works. It doesn't look right. So she did do a little, I think, just kind of rouge or something on her chest to give her a bit of a flush. But then she had something to make her sweaty. And so there is some back and forth across the walkie-talkies because of the way filming was set up. Hair and makeup was, outside the garage location. And I could have swore that they asked for slut gloss. But it actually was sweat gloss, because she was using like lip gloss to do sweat. Mm-hmm. And that gave me the giggles, right? Slut gloss. I don't even know what that is, but it's hilarious now.
I think either her or Katie said they were going to make a brand of lip gloss called Slut Gloss.
Yeah, it would probably sell pretty well.
And now to this day, if we see somebody sweaty, we're like, oh, they're wearing
slut gloss. Yeah. And so that was kind of fun. But for me, that was part of the process of going through working with my wonderful costume designer and hair and makeup person, Miriam, to what matters. And so I wanted to know about how do we get, rumpled, old-looking clothes. Because, that was my mind's eye of the character. He would have old clothes. He wouldn't really care. They wouldn't be, like, filthy, but they would be worn, loved. And she's like, nobody's going to notice. Don't worry about it. Right?
No, she did such a great job, though, even like with like all the purchasing and nailing, kind of the suit that we wanted for Mary. And I think like when when we do this shot where we look down at his hand to see that he's not wearing a wedding ring,
Right.
she had a bracelet on him that she
Yeah.
said like a kid would have made him.
Yeah.
And so just like small little things,
Right.
I thought she did such a great job
She did a
picking
great
out
job.
the wardrobe for everybody.
I was dreaming too big. I was thinking we needed to have distressed clothing that, she would have to, drag behind her car for a week to get it. And she's like, no. Like, kind of let me do my
knows her
job.
craft.
Right. Yeah. And I really thought that worked well. She brought a lot of options and budget. And that was another thing that, we learned from the first film is kind of how much we need to allocate for different things. How much can we get for a very low budget, right, as opposed to on a big film. But part of that, though, was we didn't have backup outfits, right? We had one of each. And this is important because the Chucklehead writer put in a food montage. And so then the director was paranoid that there would be a spill. And, how are we going to get that stain out of that T-shirt?
That director needs to have a conversation with his writer.
Yeah, he really does. Those two guys are not communicating. But I originally just thought that there would be kind of some food, and we had a local restaurateur give us a bunch of food in kind of to-go containers because the character is getting catering samples.
There hasn't been fancier food that didn't appear on camera.
Right.
Because we thought it was going to be on camera, and then that was one of the things that went in the first edit.
And when we looked at the footage, basically what happened for the montage is I said, we're just going to film it once, start to finish. I'm going to roll camera, and the two of you just go to town. This is going to be MOS, so don't worry about dialogue.
That means that there's not going to be any sound played. There's just going to be the music.
Right, which is a wonderful song written for the film by Karyn Ann. She also did the song in A New Promise, and
Yep.
I love both of those tunes, some of my favorites. And when we looked at the footage, I think it was over 8 minutes of the montage, and I was like, I like it all.
Yeah. He didn't want to cut any of it.
But I had to. And I had to keep cutting, and every time we would show it to people, the montage is a little too long.
Yeah.
And it killed me to take out
Gotta
some
kill
of
your
that stuff.
babies.
Yeah, they both did such a fantastic job.
Yeah, it was funny. I'll make you a little 7-minute, and you can just put it on a loop.
Yeah, I actually did wonder about that on the the DVD in the old days. That would be one of the bonus, the extra
Right.
scenes.
The lengthy montage.
Right, or maybe there'd be like an Easter egg in the opening menu. You hit up arrow, left, right, enter or something, and you get to the food montage, which is again kind of I make a joke, but a director trademark because I love me a montage. I notice it in every film. I like having a montage, and I really feel like in this case it did the effect of time has passed, but it also showed the change in their relationship as he's becoming playful. And now they're going back and forth. And again, the actors were wonderful because I kind of give them this vague direction, and they just sold it. It was wonderful.
It was fun.
Yeah. We also, a thing to think about was in costuming, right? We had I think an advantage that her suit was gray. So it was good for color correction. Yeah. Another thing at-home filmmakers, independent filmmakers think about. Put somebody in white or black or gray 50, right? And at the end of the film, I was pretty proud of the line, the final, parting shot. That's what she told my dad too.
Yeah.
And then one of the actors came up with, they had an idea for something else, like another line or two after that. And I'll be honest, I forget now what the idea was. And we tried it, right? Because I wanted to embrace the idea of we try everything.
Right.
If we have the time and the money and everything, we had the setup.
Right.
And
you
it
were
just,
very collaborative in that way.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that because that was my intent, right? I was trying to be collaborative. And I did add lines. What I tried to do was, as I watched them go through rehearsal, if they gave a line with a slightly different wording and it wasn't critical to have a specific wording, I would just change the script to match kind of their to make it more natural for them. But but I mentioned this other ending, and I tried to be open to it because I loved the last line, but maybe somebody had a better idea, but it didn't work, and so we didn't go with it, which isn't the worst thing. But I wanted people to feel like it was that we contributed to it, and I have to say we shot a lot more footage for this film than we did for A New Promise, and that maybe was part of why editing was more difficult, because we had a lot more footage to look at. And one of our friends says he likes to shoot 2 takes of every shot, and that's enough, right? And for the most part, I think we stuck to around that, but we had a lot of different angles. So we would shoot the same series of dialogue from 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 different, because I wanted to get just kind of a wide of the 2 of them in there of the whole thing. So that was kind of our fallback. When all else failed, we could go to that 2 shot of them sitting there, right? But then we did a bunch of different angles. So I maybe made life worse for the editor.
That's just why it took a few months longer than we thought.
So one of the things that I think made this film easier for us was that we had hired a cinematographer. And so one person could be director, one person could be producer, although my producer was also the sound person. But that's, I think, as we move forward, I think that's probably a good idea, right? Is to not try to do more than one thing. Is to really focus in on one particular skill at a time. So that would be kind of the takeaway, which is, of course, it's going to bring the budget up. But I think it worked out better doing that this way this time.
And I think next time having maybe even another sound person and another editor would be good. I mean, you get more storytellers involved, which I don't think is a bad thing, especially because we are open to collaboration and appreciate that. And so I think by having, and actually a number of the videographers that I've been talking to lately, they edit their own stuff. And so it's possible we could get a 2-for-1 kind of,
right,
if we go with one of them for the next film.
Yeah, I think for Katie's Front Porches, her cinematographer was also the editor.
Yeah, and there's a benefit there. They were on set. They saw it. They know, they remember what are the good takes, what are the circle takes.
Exactly.
And then if there's a shot that they maybe advocated for, they're going to make sure that, and it was successful, they're going to make sure that one gets in the film.
Right. Maybe just cuts out, one extra layer of communication and possible miscommunication. So that's something to think about. And so that's why I think of raising the budget, unfortunately, right, is as you get these other people involved and they're doing work, right? So it's nice to be able to pay people, but it's just the more mouths you have to feed, right, the more you need. And trying to find a way to do it on a budget is really kind of the challenge, right? Instead of having a studio give you, $5 million and say, go make a film, which would probably be fun. You're now doing things in a slightly different way because your budget's $5,000. It's 1,000 times smaller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing, I love the conversation that they have at the end when they're both talking about control and how she tries to control everything. And he's kind of realized with the death of his wife that you can't control everything. And that was really well written. I like that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were talking about that last scene, that last line. I'm very proud of the editing of that scene.
Yes.
Because the elevator door sounds are all sound effects, and I felt like I layered them really well. And then she puts her hand out, and I feel like it really sells that there are doors that are opening, and then he leans over, and then, he walks out, and you hear the ding. I felt like it's hard to sometimes time that stuff and have it feel real. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes think that that's the sound of that elevator.
I think you did a fantastic job on all the elevator sounds. They just were so perfect. And the way you put them in there, they feel so natural.
Yeah, we even have like a low hum. Mm-hmm. And there were a number of people that, or I shouldn't say number, 2 people said that we should put music or like some soundtrack or something. But I thought it was wise of you. You said, no, I want it to be like just bone quiet almost, because I think and that's why at the very beginning, there's the hum, and then the hum stops when the elevator stops, because it's important that the audience realizes, oh, they're now in just this solid
box
that isn't moving. And maybe on one level, I could see an argument made for office sounds, because it's like, oh, there's a world going on around them. But in a way, we didn't want to distract the audience. We wanted them to just focus on these 2 in this elevator, have no outside interference or influence or really realization that there's well, I guess they do, because she says like, oh, I'm late to pick up her son and stuff. But for the most part, it's just the 2 of them in this elevator. There's
nothing else to interact with but the other person.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love the and I think this balance is hard to kind of find, but at the very end, how you end it, I don't think it's too saccharine sweet. I think it's like and I just read, we were going over some stuff, and a friend of mine said, like, I just love that last little note that you hit. Like, you know, I'm sure there is a porn out there with in an elevator. Like, we didn't want to go there. They don't know each other long enough to even really have a first kiss. Like, that would almost feel like you were headed towards a very salacious, and that's not what this is. It's just a chance meeting. And who knows, they could just be friends. They could, but there is this little spark of maybe there's a future for the 2 of them that involves each other.
Right. And you see, that's one of the recurring lines where she says, well, I'm still not going to marry you. Right. And that's calling back to the beginning of the film, where he says, that's how my dad met my wife. So. Right.
Yeah. No,
it all comes back.
Well done, sir. Well done. Thank per the awards that you got, which I will list in the show notes, because we not only got selected for a good dozen or so, but we took home some awards, and some that I'm really proud of, like our actors won awards, our production designer. So like that craftsman who made that elevator was recognized. And I just think how great for our cast and crew to get acknowledged, as well as yourself for writing a sweet movie.
I do like this film, and at the risk of being needy, I would say, if you like it, go ahead and drop me a line at mike@dodgemediaproductions.com, because I could use all the praise I can get. I'm needy.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody likes to hear that somebody liked what they did. So I think.
Right. For me, I mean, to kind of, just be honest about it, as the payoff for me is to feel like the art that we made affected someone. Right. That's why I do it. I can see how a person maybe would say, I like to do this thing and it doesn't matter if others like it. But for me, that's part of what the payoff is to affect others, and hopefully in a good way. But I suppose even if it angered them, maybe that would be affecting them. But I was more thinking they're like, oh, this is a really good film.
Good praise only, please.
Yeah, I'd rather. I mean, the criticism, I guess you could send to something else, null@dodgemediaproductions.com. But so that's really kind of the payoff for me. And I have to say, I was so surprised, as kind of I mentioned before, at what a bond that we had as a cast and crew. And I loved that as well. I mean, I loved the process of principal photography. That was a lot more fun than I thought it would be.
Yep. We're looking forward to the next one. All right, everybody. That'll do it for this bonus episode. And quite a bonus it was.
Do we make it an hour?
Almost. Next month we will be talking, it's called Christie's Classics. We're going to be talking about 4 black and white films that I watched in film school and loved. We're doing that largely because we forgot to plan for March. After the end of the year when we planned for all our movies, I was like, we forgot to do March.
Oops.
So, but I think that these are 4 really great black and white films that are, a couple of them are classics, a couple of them you maybe have never heard of. And we just thought it would be fun to go back in history and kind of talk about the rom-coms of that era. So enjoy this episode. Enjoy the one where we talked about A New Promise. I hope you enjoyed our month of Oregon-made movies. And join us next month for Christie's Classics. And never forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.